What happens when the trail vanishes? When every lead has been exhausted, every witness has faded into the past, and a family's hope for answers dwindles into years of silence? For most cases, that is the end of the story. The file gets shelved, collecting dust in a forgotten corner of an evidence room. But sometimes, the silence is just a pause before a shocking revelation. Sometimes, a single unexpected event can blow a case wide open, revealing a truth more stunning than anyone ever conceived. Welcome to Crime Scene. Today, we are examining 4 notorious cold cases that were solved by the most improbable means. These are not just tales of loss. They are intricate puzzles cracked by extraordinary twists. We'll uncover how a dedicated amateur from her home computer solved a mystery that baffled police for 17 years. How a decorated officer became the very evil he swore to fight. How a family's obsession with reputation buried a century-old secret. And how a popular television show unmasked a monster hiding in plain sight. If you believe that no mystery should remain unsolved, hit that subscribe button and activate your notifications. You are not going to want to miss what comes next. Our first case begins in August of 2003 in Charleston, West Virginia. 64-year-old Jerry Holbert was a family man, but his life was complicated by the fog of dementia. His plan was simple: take a Greyhound bus to Ohio to visit his son. It was a trip he was looking forward to. He said his goodbyes, headed for the station, and was never seen by his family again. When Jerry didn't arrive, his family reported him missing. The search began, but there were no leads. No witnesses, no clues. Jerry Holbert had simply vanished. 1 week later, and over 200 miles away, a discovery was made in the Holston River in Kingsport, Tennessee. Human remains were found, but the body was so decomposed that visual identification was impossible. An autopsy suggested the cause of death was drowning, with no obvious signs of violence. The authorities had a body, but they had no name. In his pocket, they found a BB&T bank envelope with $267 in cash. This was a vital piece of information, as there were no BB&T branches in the Kingsport area, suggesting the man was not a local. But the clue led nowhere. Over the years, investigators commissioned a clay model and later an artist's sketch to try and give the man a face, but no one recognized him. The John Doe from Tennessee remained a mystery, and the missing person from West Virginia remained a ghost. 17 years, the two files sat in separate states, completely unconnected. The case was ice cold. The breakthrough came not from a detective agency, but from a retired social worker in Oklahoma named Patty Childress. Patty dedicated her free time to searching the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, known as NamUs, hoping to connect dots that others had missed. One day in June 2020, she decided to expand her search radius far beyond her usual scope. She meticulously cross-referenced cases until 2 files caught her eye: the John Doe found in Tennessee and the missing man from West Virginia. The timelines matched. The general descriptions were consistent. Patty saw the connection that had been overlooked for nearly 2 decades. She immediately contacted the Kingsport Police Department with her theory. Acting on her tip, detectives reached out to Jerry Holbert's family to obtain a DNA sample. Thanks to advancements in forensic technology, they finally had a match. The John Doe was Jerry D. Holbert. It's believed that due to his dementia, Jerry boarded the wrong bus and ended up tragically lost. For his family, the news was heartbreaking, but it was also an answer. After 17 years of uncertainty, they finally had closure, all thanks to the persistence of a citizen investigator who refused to let a forgotten story remain unfinished. Our next story takes us back in time to the rigid world of New York's high society. It was December 12, 1910, and 25-year-old Dorothy Arnold had the world at her feet. She was a college graduate, an aspiring writer, and the daughter of a wealthy, prominent family. That afternoon, she left her family's stately Upper East Side home to go shopping for a new dress. She was last seen around 2 p.m. on 5th Avenue, where she bought a box of chocolates and a book before briefly stopping to chat with a friend. She mentioned she might take a walk through Central Park. Then, Dorothy Arnold stepped out of the historical record and into legend. When she didn't return home, her family made a fateful decision. Their primary concern was not finding their daughter, but avoiding a public scandal. Instead of calling the police, they waited. For 6 critical weeks, they kept her disappearance a secret from the authorities, hoping to protect the family name from gossip. They hired the famous Pinkerton Detective Agency to conduct a covert search, scouring hospitals, morgues, and even passenger lists for steamships bound for Europe. But their private efforts were fruitless. By the time her father finally held a press conference in January 1911, any trail that might have existed had long since gone cold. The family's fear of embarrassment had given a potential predator, or Dorothy herself, an insurmountable head start. But as the belated investigation finally got underway, it revealed that the proper socialite her family presented to the world was only part of the story. The perfect heiress had a secret, and that secret may have been the key to everything. Investigators discovered Dorothy was deeply involved with a 40-year-old engineer named George Griscom Jr., a man her family strongly disapproved of. She had even pawned some of her jewelry to finance a secret week-long trip to be with him in Boston. At the same time, her dreams of becoming a writer were a source of deep disappointment. A magazine had recently rejected her short stories, and her family had reportedly dismissed her literary ambitions. The image of a happy, contented young woman began to fall apart, replaced by one of a person feeling trapped and frustrated. To this day, no trace of Dorothy Arnold has ever been found. Her disappearance remains one of America's most famous unsolved mysteries. Was she the victim of a random, violent act? Did she take her own life, despondent over her forbidden love and failed career? Or did she meticulously plan her own escape, vanishing to start a new life free from her family's control? The idea of a family hiding a disappearance for fear of scandal is shocking. Do you think their pride sealed Dorothy's fate, or was she already gone? Let me know your theory in the comments below. And while you're there, if you're finding these stories compelling, please hit that like button. It truly helps the channel grow. On the night of May 17, 1999, the peace of a Jacksonville, Florida neighborhood was shattered. Saad Kawaf, a 39-year-old convenience store owner, was ambushed in his own garage by 2 assailants, a man and a woman. A violent struggle ensued. Inside the home, Saad's wife, Samar, was attacked by the female intruder and bound with duct tape. The attackers were brutally efficient. They murdered Saad and fled into the night with around $53,000 in cash that he was known to keep at the house. The entire home invasion was a terrifying ordeal of calculated violence. Investigators at the scene collected vital DNA evidence, including blood samples left behind by the perpetrators. In 2003, the samples were run through the National CODIS database, the best tool law enforcement had at the time. But there were no matches. With no suspects and no new information, the case stalled. For the Kawaf family, the pain was immense. They were left without answers, haunted by the memory of the attack. For 21 years, the case file sat, another unsolved homicide with little hope of ever being closed. But in 2018, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit decided to try a new approach. They sent the decades-old DNA evidence to Parabon Nanolabs, a company specializing in the revolutionary field of genetic genealogy. The lab went to work, building a family tree from the killer's DNA. The results didn't just identify a suspect, they delivered a profound shock to the entire law enforcement community. The DNA belonged to a man named William Robert Baer Jr. and his ex-wife, Melissa Jo Schaefer. The true betrayal was Baer's identity. He was a retired detective who had served with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office for 27 years. The DNA didn't just point to a killer, it pointed to one of their own. The man who swore to protect and serve had been the monster in the dark all along. Baer and Schaefer were arrested in July 2020. Baer pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Schaefer took a plea deal for a 30-year sentence. The resolution raised disturbing questions about Baer's long career and the integrity of other cases he handled. But for the Kawaf family, after 2 decades of waiting, the powerful combination of determined detectives and modern science finally delivered justice. Our final case takes us to the affluent town of Westfield, New Jersey, and introduces us to a man who was the very definition of a pillar of the community. John List was a 46-year-old accountant, a war veteran, and a devout Lutheran who taught Sunday school. He lived with his family in a sprawling 19-room mansion, the perfect portrait of the American dream. But behind this mask of suburban piety was a man coming undone by financial pressure. On November 9th, 1971, he decided on a horrific solution. He moved through his home and, one by one, methodically shot his wife Helen, his mother Alma, and his 3 teenage children, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick. His planning was extraordinarily precise. He placed the bodies of his wife and children on sleeping bags in the mansion's ballroom. He then sat down and wrote a 5-page letter to his pastor, explaining that he saw his family falling away from their faith and that he had killed them to save their souls. Before leaving, he went through the entire house and carefully cut his own face out of every single family photograph. He canceled the mail, the newspaper, and milk deliveries, and called the children's schools to say they would be on vacation for a few weeks. He turned on the radio to a religious station, left the lights on, and walked out the door. It was nearly a month before the bodies were discovered. John List drove to JFK Airport, abandoned his car, and vanished. He became the subject of one of the largest manhunts in FBI's history, but the trail was completely cold. He moved to Denver, Colorado, and created a new identity, assuming the name Robert Bob Clark. He built a new life that was a mirror image of his old one. He got a job as an accountant, joined a local Lutheran church, and in 1985, he even remarried a woman who had no idea she was living with a fugitive wanted for 5 murders. For 17.5 years, John List was a ghost, hiding in plain sight. By 1989, the case was all but forgotten. As a last resort, it was featured on the popular television show, America's Most Wanted. The segment showcased a groundbreaking piece of forensic art. A forensic sculptor named Frank Bender was tasked with creating an age-progressed bust of what List might look like. Bender didn't just add wrinkles. He used psychological profiling, predicting that List's rigid and controlled personality would be reflected in his features over time. On May 21, 1989, the show aired. In Denver, a former neighbor of Bob Clark was watching. She saw the bust and was stunned by the resemblance. She picked up the phone and called the hotline. The tip led authorities directly to Virginia, where List was then living. He was arrested on June 1, 1989. Though he denied his identity at first, fingerprint evidence confirmed he was the man they had been searching for nearly 2 decades. He was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 5 consecutive life terms. In a television interview from prison, he showed no remorse, stating he was confident he would be reunited with his family in heaven. The case remains a landmark event, not only as a terrifying example of the darkness that can hide behind a normal facade, but as a testament to the power of forensic science and media in bringing a fugitive to justice. A family man lost in the system, an heiress who vanished into thin air, a business owner murdered in his own home, and a family erased by the man who should have been their protector. 4 separate tragedies, frozen in time for decades. From a dedicated citizen with a laptop to a killer hiding behind a badge, these cases prove that no secret can stay buried forever. They remind us that behind every cold case file is a human story waiting for its final chapter, and sometimes justice arrives in the most unexpected way imaginable. What did you think of these cases? Which twist shocked you the most? If you have a case you'd like me to investigate here at the crime scene, drop it in the comments. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves a good mystery. Until next time, stay vigilant.